He looked at you with eyes that were absolutely piercing, not hostile, just real sincerity that said this man is unusual.
He was small, even by Vietnamese standards. Only 4 feet 11 inches tall and barely 100 pounds, he appeared frail.
He tried to project this image of himself as a simple, modest, emaciated, kind of wandering scholar. In fact, he was a tough guy.
Perhaps no leader in history has resisted the guns of the enemy as stubbornly or as long as this little man.
He's a very shrewd politician and a very good actor.
He had an unshakable will that helped liberate a country and humble a superpower. In the late 19th century, Indochina was France's most valuable colony. The French made huge amounts of money with rubber and rice exports, especially from the territory now known as Vietnam. Unfortunately, the native people received little or no benefit of this wealth. They had few rights within their own country and little hope for a better life. Life was only slightly better for the family of Ho Chi Minh.
What we do know about his family generally is that they were upper class or gentry, as were all the communist revolutionaries.
Ho Chi Minh's father, Huynh Sin Soc, came from the village of Kim Lien in Nghệ An, a poor province in central Vietnam. On May 19, 1890, his wife gave birth to their third child and their second son. He was named Nguyen Sin Kung, but would one day be known around the world as Ho Chi Minh. When Ho turned 11, tragedy struck the family. While his father was away, his mother died shortly after giving birth to a third son.
You can imagine the effect this had. I mean, being faced with the fact that his father was away and his mother had died, and he was responsible for this, basically an infant. And when his father came back to Hue, he took him back to his home village.
Ho Chi Minh's father served as a mandarin or local official and spent a great deal of time away from home. Fortunately, relatives and family friends helped take care of Ho and his brother and sister. Initially, Ho's early education was in the traditional study of Chinese characters and Confucian philosophy.
But in his early teens, his father apparently became convinced that for his sons to succeed, they needed a French education. He sent both of them to a preparatory school run by the imperial regime in such a way as to instruct the students in the French language and French culture.
Though Ho's father worked for the imperial bureaucracy, he routinely criticized it for so easily relinquishing the country's independence to the French.
He was recalled to Hue, and eventually he was dismissed entirely from the bureaucracy. And it's at that point that his life fell apart. And he went to Saigon, he took a job for a while on a rubber plantation. Later he sold traditional medicines.
Ho's father spent the rest of his life wandering the countryside, struggling to make a living, while Ho lived in Hue. He saw less and less of his father. This had a great impact on Ho. He also believed that his father had been punished for simply saying what everyone knew was true. Most Vietnamese suffered greatly at the hands of their colonial masters. Those who protested or even complained were often imprisoned, beaten, or even killed by the omnipotent French colonials. In 1908, at the age of 17, Ho was studying at the prestigious National Academy in Hue. One day, a group of farmers marched past the school, protesting the high level of Mandarin corruption and excessive taxation. Ho translated their demands into French so the local colonial officials could read them. It was his first revolutionary act, and he attracted the attention of the dreaded Sûreté, or French secret police. The next day, Ho was summarily expelled from the academy. It was his last day of formal schooling in Vietnam.
So here's this young Ho Chi Minh who is becoming educated and has a certain amount of resentment toward French colonialism, but at the same time he knows enough about France to be captivated by the great French ideals of liberty, equality, fraternity, and he wants to see how those ideals are really practiced in France. They're not practiced in Vietnam, where you have a rather repressive French colonial system.
Ho had inherited his father's rebelliousness and his wanderlust. At the age of 21, he entered a merchant marine school where he learned how to be a kitchen helper. This new skill enabled him to leave Vietnam and go abroad.
I think he left for two reasons. One is maybe quest for education, that he would be able to get better education in France, provided he could afford it. Second, he probably did not see much of an economic opportunity in Vietnam at that point of time.
Ho was hired by the French passenger liner, the La Touche-Treville. And in 1911, began an odyssey that would take him to nearly every corner of the world. Over the next few years, he saw the terrible impact of colonialism on many other countries. This had a profound influence upon him. Finally, Ho arrived in France. Despite his anti-colonial sentiments, Ho applied for entrance to the French colonial school that trained officials to serve in France's colonies around the world. This was hardly the career path of an anti-French revolutionary. Ho's application was turned down.
There's no indication as to how he reacted to the rejection, except that we may assume that it probably strengthened his assumption that he couldn't expect to work from within the system, that he was going to have to work outside the system. In other words, it could very well have been one of a whole series of steps that eventually led him into becoming a revolutionary.
Ho wandered around France for a year or so. He supported himself with a variety of odd jobs, including gardening and dishwashing. He went back out to sea between 1911 and 1917, traveling to Africa, South America, and even the United States. On one trip, he reportedly jumped ship in Boston and made his way down to New York City.
I mean, here he is seeing, as it would be to any kid from this faraway place, the skyscrapers, the highways, taking the subway up to the Bronx, taking the ferry to Hoboken. He was absolutely dazzled by the Statue of Liberty and everything it represented.
While working as a dishwasher in New York's Chinatown, Ho was amazed to learn that immigrants in the U.S. were entitled to legal rights that the Vietnamese weren't allowed to have under the French in their own country.
He said, I was with the lowest labor types in New York. There were blacks, there were Chinese, and they weren't quite as well treated as the Anglo-Saxons. But he said, you know, they could all vote. And this impressed him tremendously.
Shortly before the start of World War I, Ho left America and sailed to England. He found work in the kitchen of the famous Carlton Hotel under the legendary French chef Escoffier.
Escoffier is very impressed by Ho because Ho speaks French, because he's very courteous, and eventually is promoted to being the assistant pastry chef.
While in London, Ho had met many other passionate anti-colonialists from places like India, Africa, and Ireland. These contacts rekindled Ho's own nationalist notions. He rededicated himself to liberating his homeland. In 1917, he decided to forego a promising career as a pastry chef and move to Paris. He would learn how to become a revolutionary.